Ms. Cole, please read the title of Senate Bill 290.
Senate Bill 290, Senator Fenberg, concerning natural medicine.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 290 along with the Finance Committee report and the Appropriations Committee report.
To the Finance report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Finance Committee had a long hearing on April 20th at 4:20 p.m. And we discussed the bill, but also made two amendments, one of which added recognition of federal tribes into some of the language, and then separately another amendment that took out some language that was concerning folks around remuneration for services and a few other aspects of the bill that needed clarifying.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before us is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. Senator Kirkmeyer. No. Is the adoption of the Finance Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The Finance Committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report. Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Appropriations Committee did what they do and appropriated some money for the bill.
Is there further discussion on the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the report. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. To the bill. Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, Senate Bill 290 is a bill that implements Proposition 122. Proposition 122 was on our ballot this past fall, and it did essentially two things. It legalized use and sharing of what it refers to as natural medicine, which includes mushrooms of the particular variety that includes psychedelic substances, as well as a few other substances. And then separately, in addition to decriminalizing those, it created a regulated side of natural medicine, which essentially allows a process for someone to go and get therapy at what is called a healing center by essentially a therapist, but they're referred to as facilitators. This creates a dual track process, so someone can access licensed therapy and services that have to do with natural medicine, but separately it allows the decriminalization and personal use of these substances as well. It's an intense bill because although Prop 122 was relatively complicated, we did need to move some of the sections around to make sure that they could be implemented by the different departments. It previously contemplated almost all of the regulations to be in Title 12 or DORA, and we thought it was best to leave some of the portions of the bill in Title 12, but several other portions in other areas of law, most notably in the Department of Revenue and CDPHE, just like we do for the regulated cannabis model that we have. We do have three amendments that I would like to offer that I think don't change the substance of the bill, but provide clarification of what we intended to do in the first place.
There is an amendment at the desk. Ms. Cole, please read Amendment L014.
Amendment L014 by Senator Fenberg.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L014.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment does a couple of things. It restores the number of licenses that someone can have an interest in to what was in Prop 122, and it also clarifies what you can receive compensation for when you're providing services related to the use of natural medicine. So you still are not allowed to sell the substances or the products, but you can be compensated for basic services related to it. But it does clarify that it still is not a commercial or for-profit enterprise, but is simply being compensated for basic services and health and safety parameters and things like that.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L014? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L014. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment L014 is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. Ms. Cole, please read Amendment L015.
Amendment L015.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L15.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is based on conversations with district attorneys as well as criminal justice reform advocates and the public defenders. And this is, or sorry, not the public defenders, but criminal defense bar. This is doing a few things, but most notably, I think it adds mens rea to some of the criminal aspects of the bill, making it clear that you had to have knowingly committed the acts. And then separately, it also clarifies that the bill only applies to offenses committed on or after July 1st, 2023 for the bill.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L015? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L015. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Amendment L015 is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. Ms. Cole, please read Amendment L016.
Amendment L016 by Senator Fenberg.
Senator
amend the printed-
Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L16.
To the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is pretty simple, but enables the testing of natural medicine prior to the regulated testing program being stood up. So right now, the testing, the licensure, all of the regulated side is not actually going to be up and running until early 2025, most likely. So there's about a year worth of rulemaking and figuring out the processes to get everything in place. This allows someone to get natural medicine tested prior to that if they would like to.
Is there further discussion on Amendment L016? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L016. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Amendment L016 is adopted. To the bill. Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There may be more discussion or amendments being offered by others, but I just wanted to say this, is a bill that we've been working on for quite a while. The departments have been very involved and incredibly helpful in making sure that we get this right. We have met with and worked with numerous stakeholders that have an interest in making sure that this is successful. This is a unique proposition that was approved by the voters. We are now in the place where we are implementing this. Whether you supported it or not, it's on us to make sure it's successful. A lot of work went into this, but I fully expect that this won't be the last bill on natural medicine. We likely will have a bill next year based on a lot of the work that is going to happen on the regulated side over the next several months. And there's probably things that will come out of that process that will require us to run cleanup legislation next year and perhaps again into the future. I want to thank the drafter, Jacob Baus, for all of his hard work in helping us get this right. It was a huge lift, and he did an amazing job on it. And I want to thank everybody else who weighed in and provided feedback and input to help us get this close to as right as possible, knowing that there are going to be additional things that we're going to have to do to make sure we get it right. But a lot of people are watching. This is something that most states have not ventured to do. It's important that we get it right. I also want to say, as much as we maybe joke about the topic here, it is a very serious issue. And a lot of people have found incredible value in using these medicines to help them with mental health disorders and other issues. And I'm excited that Colorado is on the forefront of making sure that we provide a safe and responsible manner for people to access these medicines in a more regulated manner. And I think there is a lot of value on the decriminalization side of these substances as well. And there's a lot that we have yet to learn. There have been indigenous folks who have been using these substances for literally thousands of years. And I think when it comes to the government being involved in this space, there's still so much more to learn from them, their communities, and the professionals that will be working in this field moving forward. But thank you all for your time. I will defer to others with their comments at this time.
Is there further discussion on Senate Bill? Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to thank the good senator from Boulder County. There has been a lot of work that's been done on this. And there will be a lot of work still to come, just like when marijuana was first approved. I mean, it took years to get it right, and there were a lot of issues. And I appreciate the conversation that we had in committee. Yes, I sat on the finance committee for this. You know, highlighted my day. And, you know, but there's a lot of conversation how mushrooms are used for spiritual needs, medicinal, recreational. There was a lot of, yeah, so, you know, I'm sure there have been people who have tried mushrooms. I don't know, but I have not, even though maybe I sound like I have. But there were people, though, who got up and spoke about the problems with the mushrooms and about how they lost loved ones, lost children, you know, lost their son. And that was pretty heartbreaking to hear. So I'm sure, and again, I know the good senator from Boulder has put a lot of time and effort into this along with a lot of other folks, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. We still need to address some of the law enforcement's concerns. I think we're getting there, but we just don't know how it's going to go. I mean, when you start off saying things like you can't sell it, but you can share it, and then you start thinking, but how do you share it? And how do you know they aren't selling it? And if they're trading for services, is that the same as selling it? I mean, there's just a lot that's here that needs to still be unpacked. Proposition 122 allowed mushrooms and healing centers originally, only passed with 53.64% of the vote. And in fact, you know, we had a map that was handed out to us. I'll show it to you. You can see the orange is where it passed, and the blue is where it did not pass. So there were a lot of counties where it did not pass in, and it was pretty close in the first place. So that means there are a lot of voters, plenty of voters out there who did not want mushrooms. They did not want them approved. And if you heard some of the testimony, you would have heard from people who basically, like I said, their son passed away, loved ones died from mushrooms. They think it needs to be more regulated, to the range of people who pushed the measure, who, quite frankly, I think they were shocked that their measure passed because they didn't have a lot of money to spend on it. So anyways, there were plenty of voters who did not want this. And unlike what had happened with marijuana, where there was the authority within the Constitution for local governments to ban it, in this statutory provision, so this is not a constitutional provision, it's a statutory provision, it doesn't allow for local governments to ban these healing centers as stated in the bill or as stated in the law. So local government, there's local control that allows local governments to be responsive to the needs and wants of this area, but there isn't really clear local control within the bill about how they're going to address at a local level these healing centers. And this whole concept of you can't sell it, but you can share it. And they started talking about healing centers, and I'm like, and they refer to them as a business. And if it's a business, doesn't that mean they're selling something? And then it's like, well, we were told they're selling a service. But somewhere in there, you're taking the mushrooms. So somewhere, there, it seems to me like you are creating a business for it and selling it. But who knows? It's a very fine line, and it's going to take a while for us to get across it. But the language that prohibits local governments in the bill from adopting resolutions or ordinances that are unreasonable or in conflict with the bill poses the question of how much local control will actually exist. What's going to happen in our local neighborhoods? Where will these healing centers or these businesses be allowed to site? Where will they be located? This is incredibly broad language that can and will threaten time, place, and manner regulations at the local level. You may end up with a healing center or a business in your local neck of the woods. In fact, there was discussion even about how people are doing things out of their home. So you could have this in the home right next to you, in your subdivision, in your neighborhood, and at this point it doesn't feel like local government can really do very much about that to ensure that you're not being negatively impacted, your health, welfare, and safety is not being negatively impacted by Proposition 122 that went through. Marijuana, tobacco, and liquor are all regulated at the local level. So it seems that it would make sense that mushrooms too should be regulated to some extent at the local level. I think we get it. I think local governments get it that you can't ban it, but they should be able to regulate it in a way that protects the health, welfare, and safety of their citizens, of the people who live and work and have other businesses in their community. Senate Bill 290 deviates from this method, that it has been working so well, and allows for state licensing of facilities without any local input outside of time, place, and manner restrictions, and personal use and cultivation without any local regulations. Local governments don't know where the healing centers what they will actually look like, because we just don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and nobody knows. In fact, we heard from several people in committee that were kind of all over the place. And I guess I would not define someone providing a service where they give or share mushrooms with someone else in their home a healing center. But I'm thinking some of the people that testified that day probably would. Proponents are saying they will look and operate like medical facilities, which again poses a question. What would be a unreasonable or conflict if a local government has an ordinance or a regulation or a requirement in zoning? They do for medical facilities. So if a healing center is supposed to operate and look like a medical facility, why are we prohibiting local governments or not allowing local governments to have some more local control here? There's also nothing in this bill that would prohibit healing centers from looking just like a dispensary. I mean, we've been through a lot with the marijuana dispensaries. In fact, marijuana dispensaries were able to stay open during COVID, which was kind of crazy because churches had to close, but pot shops got to stay open. But the discussion in the committee was that they could look like dispensaries with flashing lights and big mushroom signs. That just feels like something we should be having some ability to control more at the local level. Local control would allow a jurisdiction that is on the fence about allowing these facilities the ability to wait and see how they're actually being implemented before rolling them out in a community near you. So I do have a couple amendments that speak to this. And again, though, I would agree with the good senator from Boulder. This is a serious issue. I know there was a lot of laughter in the committee as we were watching people testify, but this is a serious issue. It took us a long time to figure out how to get it right with marijuana. Not sure that we're even there now. We still keep carrying more bills. But what we do know from our experience even with marijuana is that local elected officials need to have some ability, more ability than what's in this law, in this bill, to ensure and mitigate negative impacts, but to ensure the safety, the health, and well-being of their community. So with that, I'm going to introduce an amendment. I'm sure the good senator from Boulder County will love this amendment.
There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L010? Senator
Amendment.
Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L010.
Any discussion on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L010 offers, I'm sure I've got the right one here, offers local control for natural medicine businesses, or what they're calling healing centers, and closes what most local governments perceive to be a loophole of offering these services in private residences. I don't think that was the intention. The bill allows the facilitators the ability to offer their services in private homes, thus going around the regulated model of healing centers. So that's what's allowed currently in this legislation. This amendment would close that loophole and would allow for local control over the commercial and regulated healing centers. Remember, these are going to get a license. Throughout the testimony, we kept hearing them called a business. We hear them call facilities. They're supposed to look like a medical facilities. When we ask questions about dispensaries, they're like, yeah, it could look like that too. So again, let's make sure local governments have the ability to provide for the health, welfare, and safety of their citizens. And I urge an aye vote on L010.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in support of this amendment of L010. We really have to look at it as a business. I mean, we've been able to control everything from marijuana to tobacco to as local control. And we want to make sure that, is there an issue? Okay. We want to make sure that moving forward that we're treating this like a business as well. And like the good senator from Brighton had said up here, when they're going to call it like, if they're going to call it like a medical center for these healing centers, then it should also look like that as well when it comes to commercial businesses and not residences. So I ask for an aye vote on amendment L010. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked for a no vote on this amendment. We were just chatting real quick to make sure I understood what this was getting at, but there is language in Prop 122 about providing these services in someone's home. So it does reference that in the original language that was approved by voters. That same concept is reflected in the bill, the implementing bill, but it doesn't say in blanket form it's allowed. It says that the department shall adopt rules to determine when and if and how that would be allowed. My understanding, and we can get more clarification if needed, is that doesn't mean that a healing center would be inside of a home. What it would mean is that a facilitator could go to someone's home to provide the services. I think the point there is that some people will be using these services for all kinds of reasons. But some people might not be able to leave their home, or for whatever it is, whatever the condition is they're treating, can't leave their home. For some people, this is for end-of-life therapy. And so I think it is just saying that the department is allowed to consider when it would be appropriate for a facilitator to offer these services in someone's home. It is not meant to allow someone to turn their home into a facility where you're just like kind of seeing customers every day kind of thing. The healing centers themselves will still be licensed facilities off-site, but this bill allows a facilitator, if the department allows it and adopts rules, to go to someone's home to provide those services. But again, it doesn't automatically allow it. It just says to the extent that it is allowed by the department, it is permitted. I will also say that this is one of those areas that I think we haven't totally unpacked or uncovered the uses or the impact or what it's going to look like. And that's what this next year is all about. This bill, at the end of the day, provides basic rulemaking authority, funding, to get this program up and running, and that's going to take a while. And I fully expect that after rulemaking and once the board meets and they deliberate and they get stakeholder input through the rulemaking process, that they're going to come back with recommendations. And this could be an area where they have very specific recommendations on when this is allowed, when it's not, or they could say, actually, we're not going to allow this for now. We think it's too risky, and we want to wait a few years until we further understand what these services would look like. So I don't think anything is going to happen in people's homes in the near term on the regulated side. I would also say that my understanding of this amendment is then you would say that services could happen in someone's home, but only if they're unregulated, which I don't think is the intent. We want people to use the regulated process if that's what's right for them. But this, I don't think would change the decriminalization side, which still allows, right now, even if this bill doesn't pass, still allows people to offer services in someone's home for them, even if they are unlicensed by the state. But keep in mind that no licenses will be issued on the regulated side until, at the earliest, January of 2025. So we have an entire whole legislative session to decide if we want to do additional legislating and rulemaking before any license is going to be issued. So I think to make sure we don't do any harm and do something accidental, we should wait, because no license will be issued in the meantime anyways.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the conversation and appreciate the explanation from the good Senator Boulder. But I would say that the amendment does not prohibit a facilitator, so that is someone who is licensed, from providing natural medicine services at private residences. So a facilitator would still be able to go to a private residence and provide natural medicine services. What it does is it restricts the practice of facilitation in a residence as a form of a home occupation. So you can't have a home business or home occupation. But if you are a natural medicine service facilitator, you're providing that service, you can go to a private residence for end of life or for any other reason, but you can't have a home occupation in your home in the middle of a subdivision. I urge an aye vote.
Senator Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, L010 is a bill that offers local control. It closes a perceived loophole of offering these services in private residences. And I think there's some disagreement about the language, but that so often happens with propositions. And we need to ensure that there's some clarity. The bill allows facilitators the ability to offer their services in private homes, thus going around the regulated model of healing centers. The amendment closes that loophole and would allow for local control over the commercial regulated healing centers and activities in private residences. Colleagues, marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol are all regulated at the local level. And even Kratom allows for local control as well. SB290, as it's drafted without these amendments, deviates from the methods that's been working so well and allows for state licensing of facilities without any local input. L010, along with the companion amendment that I think will be offered, would restore this matter of local control. The good senator from North Peltonia had a chart here. You see, everybody in red passed Amendment 122. Sort of the Front Range and the mountain resort areas and a little bit on the western slope. But if you look, and as you can see, there were large amounts of Colorado, large land areas, and important communities that voted no. In keeping with this model that we have of Colorado of allowing marijuana, tobacco, and liquor to be largely locally controlled, we need to pass these amendments. And we need to do so starting with L010. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Van Winkle.
Hey, Mr. Chair, and I have my doubts on this amendment mainly because we're acting as if Amendment 64 marijuana and the passage of the psychedelic mushrooms legislation or ballot measure are the same thing. They are two incredibly different things in that what Amendment 64 did, which is beautiful and wonderful, and I very much support it, is it discussed where that a local community could opt in to sell, to allow for the sale of marijuana products, and et cetera, et cetera. There are no sales. This is much more approved by the voters of Colorado to be used as a medicine and more of a medical style facility, something that would look much more like a dentist office in a building versus a marijuana shop or a dispensary selling marijuana. There are no sales of these products, so there's no storefronts, there's no sales, as in Amendment 64. Amendment 64 was entirely about whether you would allow for the sales in the shops in your community or not. There are no sales, there are no shops. These are more medical facilities being used by our veterans and many others in the state of Colorado.
President Frenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read this amendment several times. I still am not certain I know what it does, but I think it may do the opposite of what we are talking about. So this amendment, I think, allows for the total prohibition of natural medicine healing centers in a city. So a city could do literally the opposite of what the proposition said. So the proposition said you can't ban them. I think this says you can ban them, and if you do, you have to allow the services to be offered in someone's home. So in those cities, this would say you have to allow natural medicine services in private homes, which I think is the opposite. So this amendment would mean natural medicine services would be offered in homes, not commercial properties. So the argument that we don't want to allow this because it would change the neighborhood doesn't align, because this expressly says in those cities you can only offer the services in a private home, not in a healing center. So again, I think it's counter to what the voters approved, but also I think it does the opposite of what we've been discussing. So either way, I would say vote no on this amendment.
The motion is the adoption of Amendment L010. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment is lost. There is an amendment at the desk. Will the clerk please read L011?
Amendment L011 by Senator Kirkmeyer, amend the printed bill, page 41.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L011.
Any discussion on the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. L011, again, talks and speaks towards local control. And it states a local jurisdiction may prohibit the establishment and operation of natural medicine businesses and the cultivation and manufacture of natural medicine or natural medicine product for personal use by an ordinance enacted by the governing body or through the enactment of an initiated or referred measure, so from the citizens. And then it goes on to say, upon receiving notice of a prohibition under this section, the state licensing authority shall cease licensing any natural medicine businesses or premises in the jurisdiction. This amendment offers local control over healing centers or natural medicine businesses. And it allows for local control over personal use, cultivation. The local control is authorized here via either a local measure, so an ordinance through the local government, or by a vote of the people. So it's again to offer local control. So we understand, and you saw the map. Not every county, not every location voted for mushrooms in their community. Typically, and other types of land use issues, and other types of things that are occurring in their neighborhood, the public can initiate, they can go to their local government and ask them to put it on the ballot, or they can refer it and they can petition it onto the ballot to determine what their neighborhood looks like, what their community looks like, what's available. And this goes back to my comment before. For those communities where they said, no, we don't want to try this out in our community, where maybe they're on the fence about it, or maybe they want to wait and see what happens in other communities before they try it out in their community, this amendment would allow that to happen. Again, through a local ordinance or through a vote of the people. People get to vote on things, especially either by petitioning it onto the ballot or going to their local government and asking them to put it on the ballot. They should get to determine locally what occurs in their neighborhood, in their community, in their town, in their city. So again, this is about local control. This is about the people having the opportunity to voice what they feel should be occurring in their community. I ask for an aye vote on L011.
Senator Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we've had lots of discussions about this is not the same as marijuana, and I agree. But let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's use the same thing that we're doing with marijuana, where we give the local control to the counties. I just want to talk about this map again, because the entirety of my district voted no. And it just feels like that here we go again, where the entire state gets to choose from my communities. I think that this amendment really brings in the local control effort that should be done in our communities, where we put it on the ballot for people to decide. When I was a commissioner, we asked to keep a sales tax on the ballot, or on our, to keep collecting it for maintenance of our buildings, because our buildings are starting to deteriorate, and we asked the people to do that. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the voters of Logan County decided to do that. We should do that with this. I mean, I would argue that my people already voted in Logan County and said no to mushrooms. But let's do it again. I bet you they say no a second time. But they should be able to do that. They should have that power to do so. I ask for an aye vote on L011.
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked for a no vote on L11. First of all, this, again, very explicitly does the opposite of what voters just approved at the ballot. This bill does implement the spirit of what voters did at the ballot and makes some small changes so that it can be implemented. But this, I think, would be very core to be against the intent of the voters. The ballot measure specifically said local governments cannot ban natural medicine in their jurisdiction, but they can regulate it in terms of time, manner, and place. That's what the provision says. If it was silent on all of this, I think it would be a reasonable discussion. But by approving this amendment, we would literally be doing the opposite of what voters just approved. And I understand that this ballot measure did not pass in every county. But there are a lot of statewide ballot measures that do and don't pass in some counties. But if it's a state law, it's a state law. We still have to all follow it. That's how it works. Unless it specifically provides the opportunity for a local government to opt out, like Amendment 64 did on cannabis. So I would urge a no vote. Secondly, the way this amendment is crafted, I just want to make sure folks understand what it would do. This would allow a local government to ban licensed businesses from providing natural medicine services. It would not ban unlicensed businesses from providing natural medicine, because the decriminalization aspects of the law would still be in effect, and you can still provide services for compensation as long as you are not selling the product itself. So I don't think we are saying that we want a city or a county to ban licensed activity, but still allow them to do unlicensed activity that has no regulations or oversight from health departments, the state, and others who are looking out for the consumer interest. I ask for a no vote.
Senator Lundy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Regulation with regard to time, manner, and place, if that is permissible and accepted by the sponsor and the regulatory apparatus, would it be possible then for a local jurisdiction to say time between 1 p.m. and 1:05 p.m. on Mondays, manner, an extremely challenging manner for receiving or delivering the product, and place at a tree house yet to be constructed in Town Square? Would that be an acceptable response as people try to, quite frankly, as the great tradition of the West is, keep the jurisdiction of authority as close to the people as possible? Would my time, manner, and place solution for a municipality be acceptable?
Senator Fenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would never recommend that you eat mushrooms in a treehouse. You don't want to do that. Just joking. No, the bill specifically says that a local government can't adopt an ordinance that would be unreasonable, that would essentially keep someone from accessing the services or the medicine. And I think that would be unreasonable. So no, and if a government tried to do that or something like that, I assume it would be challenged, and I don't think it would be upheld.
Senator Lundin.
Fair enough, and reasonable is in the eye of the beholder, certainly something that courts could help us sort out, and I would substitute in my illustration a treehouse for a dank basement somewhere, a better place for mushrooms.
Seeing no further treehouse discussions, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L011. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and L011 is lost. Seeing no further discussion, the motion before the body is the passage of Senate Bill 290. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it, and 290 is adopted.